I want to be clear. I was not trying to save anyone that night. I was trying to save my soybeans. It was just past 2 in the morning when something hit my south field. I heard it from the house. Not an explosion exactly. More like the sky deciding to fall in one specific spot. The windows rattled. My dog, a 10-year-old beagle named Biscuit, crawled under the bed and refused to come out. I pulled on my boots, grabbed my flashlight and my old shotgun, and drove my truck down the dirt path toward the noise. I was mostly thinking about the fence. I had just spent 4 days repairing the south fence line after a storm took out 200 feet of it. 4 days of post holes and wire and sunburn, and now something had apparently decided to level the whole thing again. By the time I got close enough to see the smoke, I had already calculated the repair cost in my head, and I was not in a good mood. The thing sitting in my field was not a meteor. It was about 60 feet long, shaped a little like a crescent, and it was making a low hum that I could feel in my back teeth. Steam or smoke, I could not tell which, rose from 3 points along its surface. It had crushed a clean path through my soybeans, which were 3 weeks from harvest. That was the part that really got to me. 3 weeks. I stood there for a moment, then I walked closer, because I am a farmer, and farmers go toward problems. That is just how it works. A door opened in the side of the ship. Not a hatch that blew off, not an explosion. It slid open, quietly and carefully, and a figure stepped out. She was tall, maybe 6.5 feet, with pale silver skin and 4 fingers on each hand. She was wearing something that looked like armor, dark and fitted, and one side of it was cracked. Something violet was moving slowly down her arm, which I understood after a moment was blood. She stood upright despite it, shoulders back, head high, and she looked at me the way I imagine a queen looks at a peasant who has wandered into the wrong room. She said something. The sounds were sharp and rhythmic, like someone playing a flute very quickly. Then she paused. Something behind her ear flickered with a faint blue light, and she spoke again. I am Cereal, 3rd princess of the Velkara sovereign line. I claim sanctuary under the right of open ground. She had a slight delay between her mouth moving and the words reaching me, like a film where the sound is half a second off. Kneel, if you are a creature of reason. I looked at her arm. You're bleeding, I said. She blinked. Whatever she expected me to say, it was not that. I have a first aid kit in the truck, I told her, and a bottle of water. I don't know if water is something you drink, but it's there. I looked past her at the ship. Is there anyone else in there? There was. Her guard, a large, broad-shouldered alien who introduced himself, through the same flickering translator, as Dax, was inside with a cut across his side that would have put a human in the hospital. He was sitting upright and pretending he was fine. I recognized the behavior immediately, because I had done it myself plenty of times. I cleaned the wound with what I had, used butterfly strips from the kit, and wrapped it with a bandage roll. He watched my hands the entire time with an expression I could not read. What are you? He asked. A farmer, I said. Eli Marsh. That's my house up the hill. He looked at Cereal. She looked at him. Some kind of conversation passed between them that had nothing to do with words. Inside the ship, once Cereal trusted me enough to let me in, Dax explained what had happened. They were running from a group called the Reclaimers, a faction within their own people who believed the royal line had grown weak and needed to be replaced. Their ship had taken damage during an escape, and the navigation system had pulled them toward the nearest gravitational anchor, which happened to be Earth, which happened to be my farm. He explained the prophecy while Cereal sat quietly and let him. The Velkara had a very old story about a figure called the Unbroken One, someone who would appear at the end of a long darkness, found alone and unafraid in a field of dead stars, holding a weapon, waiting without knowing what they were waiting for. Their sensors, when they scanned the area during their descent, had read my harvested fields as a dead landscape and my shotgun as a weapon of war. The fact that I had walked toward a crashed alien spacecraft at 2 in the morning, without running or screaming had, apparently, confirmed everything for Cereal. I'm not a warrior, I told her. The prophecy does not speak of warriors, she said. She was watching me in a way that was hard to describe. Careful, like she was measuring something she couldn't find a ruler for. I let it go for the moment. There was more urgent work to do. Their fuel line had a cracked manifold. I know that because Dax showed me, and made a gesture that clearly meant they were not going anywhere. I looked at it for a while. I went back to my truck. I came back with a length of wire, a pipe wrench, a tube of high-temperature sealant I use for exhaust repairs, and some electrical tape. Dax watched me work with the expression of a man watching something impossible happen slowly. It took about 40 minutes. When I tested the seal and it held, he said something in his own language that the translator did not catch. "What did he say?" I asked Cyril. "He said that a man who can fix anything is more dangerous than a man who can only destroy," she told me. I did not know what to say to that, so I made coffee. I brought it out in a thermos and poured 3 cups. Cyril looked at hers, the way you look at something you are not sure is safe. She smelled it, then drank it, then sat very still for a moment. Dax followed. There was a long silence. "This is remarkable," Cyril said quietly. "It's gas station coffee," I told her. "I had it in the truck." She looked at the cup. "Your world produces something like this routinely?" "Every corner store," I said. "Open 24 hours. She was quiet again after that, and I got the feeling I had said something more significant than I meant to. Deputy Lena Cruz arrived around 4 in the morning, after my neighbor Dale called the non-emergency line about a strange light over my property. Lena and I have known each other for 20 years. She pulled up in her cruiser, stepped out, looked at the ship, looked at Cyril and Dax, looked at me standing there with a thermos of coffee. She took out her notepad. She wrote something. She tore the page out and crumpled it. She wrote something else. She looked at me again. "Eli," she said. "Lena," I said. She got back in her cruiser. "I was never here," she said through the window, and drove back down the road. I have never respected anyone more. The reclaimers found us around dawn. It was a drone first. Small, fast, dark, moving in low, over the north tree line. I didn't know what it was. What I knew was that it was moving wrong. Too deliberate. Too interested in the ship. And it was making my chickens panic in the coop. I picked up my deer rifle from the truck rack, tracked it, and shot it out of the sky at a little over 400 yards. It was not a difficult shot. I had been shooting deer and coyotes on this land since I was 12 years old. When I turned around, Cyril was standing completely still, with both hands pressed flat against her chest. It was the Velkara gesture, I later learned, for witnessing something sacred. Dax had gone the color of old ash. "That was a Mark 7 reconnaissance unit," Dax said. "It moves at," he said a number that the translator gave me as something between a hummingbird and a falling star. "No one shoots those down." "It was bothering my chickens," I said. The 3 ground soldiers arrived an hour later, dropping from a transport that came in fast and low. They were bigger than Dax, wearing full armor, carrying weapons that hummed with stored energy. They landed at the end of my driveway and walked toward the ship with the slow confidence of people who have never been told no. I told Dax and Cyril to stay behind the ship. What I did was not elegant. I am not going to pretend it was. I used my John Deere 8R to block the driveway. 8 tons of tractor parked sideways across the gravel. I ran the grain auger out from the barn at full extension, which put a 12-inch steel tube at chest height across their approach. Then I stood next to the tractor with my rifle and waited. They stopped. The one in front said something. My translator, Cyril, had given me a clip-on unit, rendered it as, "Move aside, soil creature. This is my land," I said. "You're not walking up my driveway." There was a long moment. I want to be honest. My hands were steady, but my heart was not. I was scared. I have been scared plenty of times in my life. The difference is that fear has never once stopped me from doing what needed doing, because on a farm, you do not get to choose your timing. The storm doesn't care that you're tired. The bank doesn't care that you're grieving. You show up anyway. You always show up anyway. The standoff lasted 9 minutes. I counted. In the end, 2 of them tried to go around the barn and met the electric fence I had quietly reactivated from the panel inside the tractor cab. The third came straight at me and met the auger at speed. None of them were permanently hurt. All 3 of them were done for the day. They regrouped, retreated to their transport, and left. Dax was waiting when I walked back. He looked at me differently than he had before. He didn't say anything. He just nodded. Once. Slowly. From him, I understood that was enough. That evening, Cyril and I sat outside on the tailgate of my truck while Dax worked inside the ship running final checks. The fields were quiet. The sky was the deep blue that comes just before full dark, the kind my wife used to call the in-between sky. Not day and not night yet, just the world pausing. Why were you not afraid? Cyril asked. I thought about it honestly before I answered. I was afraid, I said. I'm afraid of a lot of things. I was afraid in 2012, when we went 8 months without meaningful rain, and I didn't know if I'd have a farm left by fall. I was afraid for 3 years while my wife was sick, and I was afraid the morning she wasn't there anymore. Fear and I are old acquaintances. I looked out at the dark shape of the south field. But fear doesn't get to make the decisions. You still have to fix the fence. You still have to plant the field. You still have to be there. That's all. Cyril was quiet for a long moment. On my world, she said finally, we train our greatest soldiers for years to achieve what you are describing. I'm not a soldier, I said. I'm just someone who had to keep going. She looked at the fields. I think, she said slowly, that may be harder. She stopped calling me Unbroken One after that. She called me Eli. In the morning the ship was ready. Cyril stood at the base of the ramp and offered me things. A title, a fleet commission, a seat on something called the High Council, access to resources I could not begin to understand. She was formal about it, the way she had been formal about everything at the start, but there was something softer underneath it now. I thanked her. I told her I had 400 acres of soybeans to replant. She stared at me. I was completely serious. She knew it. Then she laughed. It was the first real laugh, not polite, not diplomatic, but genuine, surprised out of her, like she hadn't meant to do it. It changed her whole face. At last, she said, I understand the prophecy. What do you mean? I asked. We believed the Unbroken One would be a great destroyer, she said. Someone who could not be defeated. But I think the old words mean something else. I think they mean someone who cannot be moved from what they are. She looked at me one more time, carefully, the way she had that first night. You are exactly what you are, Eli Marsh. No more and no less. The universe has very few of those. Dax saluted me from the ramp. I nodded back. Cyril said something in Velkara before she stepped inside. The translator didn't catch it. A week later, when I figured out the comms unit she left on my kitchen table, I asked Dax what she had said. He was quiet for a moment. It means, roughly, he said, that you make the universe feel less large. I sat with that for a while. Then I went out to the south field, started up the planter, and got back to work. The fence still needed fixing. The soybeans weren't going to plant themselves. The sky above Kansas was the same color it had always been, wide and pale and indifferent. And somewhere up in it, moving away at a speed I would never understand, was a silver ship carrying a princess who had come looking for a legend and found a farmer instead. I think she got the better end of that deal. The universe, as it turns out, has never met a farmer before. That is its problem, not mine.